correctly with the correct amount.
D20 Radio, where gamers roll.
www.d20radio.com.
Welcome to Me and Steve Talk RPG, the podcast where me and my friend Steve try and help you get the most out of your role-playing game experience.
Welcome back to Me and Steve Talk RPGs. I'm here with my friend Steve.
Hello, Steve.
And we're going to talk some RPGs, but before we get into that, we're going to talk about fixing games with We Fix Games.
Yes. We Fix Games is another podcast here on the D20 Radio Network. It is hosted by Laura and Jerica, and it's, well, they dive deep into the story of video games, what worked, what didn't, and how they'd make it better. It's part thoughtful critique, part chaotic brainstorm, plenty of laughs, hot takes, a fair bit of cussing, and, they say come for the plot holes, stay for the unhinged redesigns. Now,
Cool.
As not much of a video gamer myself, I honestly haven't actually checked the podcast itself out, but I have met Laura on a couple of occasions. They're really cool. And so, yeah, check it out if you're into video games and stuff. I know, according to their website, their latest episode is about the game Sable, which purports to be a beautiful game where you can explore what you want your life to be and choose your own destiny in what appears to be a post-apocalyptic world. I don't know.
Cool.
They do some
absolutely.
like, Twitch streaming and stuff too. So, yeah, check them out. There'll be links in the show notes.
Very, very cool.
Mm-hmm. Along with the rest of the D20 Radio Network, where there's all kinds of cool podcasts about game-related stuff.
Always. Mm-hmm. So, as you tend to do, you were listening to Ken and Robin.
Couple-year-old episode. I've got a backlog, but, hey.
You had sort of had to come up an idea with the topic for tonight.
Well, yeah, so Ken and Robin, in their Gaming Hut segment of the podcast I was listening to on my drive home, talked about fumbles, and it's a thing, right? Like, some people hate them, some people love them, and there are things that in a lot of games anymore, there are no actual rules for fumbles, but a lot of us tend to play with them anyway. And, I think there's room for... So, I think when most of us think of that, it's, I rolled a 1, what sort of whatever happens, right? And it can be really funny and break stuff up, but then again, sometimes you don't really want that depending on the type of game you're playing. So, you know what I mean? Like, there's all kinds of ways to...
Yeah, well, and sometimes a fumble doesn't have to, like... Sorry, hold on. I just knocked my mic into the next dimension.
Extra dimensional podcasting this week on Me and Steve.
Sometimes a fumble doesn't have to be crazy. Like, if you're going to play with fumbles, a lot of the time, what I like to do is it's, I rolled a 1. Okay, I'll have you confirm that. Like they used to back in AD&D. Remember confirming
I thought that was
fumbles.
a Pathfinder thing.
It might be. I don't remember where I stole it from, but I always make my players confirm that it was truly a fumble. And then from there, I'll be like, okay, well, the first time it happens, maybe you drop your weapon. And like, that's enough of a setback to be like, oh man, I dropped my weapon. Now I got to pick that up. That takes an extra action, blah, 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 blah. It's that type of thing. Sometimes, if thematically it hits and it's a true fumble and we're like, oh, well, I didn't just drop my weapon. I don't know, accidentally dropped my weapon and hurt myself. And like playing with fumbles can be a lot of fun, but you got to be really careful because you can just, I don't know, you could be too mean with it sometimes. Well, and I think that's where I'm always confirm that you did actually fumble.
Well, I think too, and some of the point they were going for is like, okay, if you're playing a very kind of beer and pretzels, semi-comedic, be it D&D or whatever type of game, or you're going for more of that kind of slapsticky vibe, absolutely, right? That's like, I used to, years ago, I listened to a podcast, I think it was called The Hapless Heroes, maybe? And part of their whole shtick was sometimes asking for rolls, hoping for fumbles,
Right.
But again, that was their bit, right? And if that's the way you want to play with them, by all means, right? Do your fumble rolls however it works for your table. But also, like, okay, let's say you're playing, I don't know, we'll say the Exalted game that we're in right now that we're going to start releasing very, very soon. Man, like, a fumble doesn't, the way that game has been going, a fumble in the, we'll call it classic sense, right? Doesn't feel like the right thing.
Right. Right.
And so,
yeah.
like, and
See,
this is kind of
why. Oh, sorry.
No. Well, so, and that was kind of what Ken and Robin were talking about, right? Is what do you do when, like, it's all well and good if everyone's there for laughs and comedy, but what if you're trying to tell a dramatic story and it's very much more of a narrative than, than a bunch of laughs, we'll say.
Right.
You don't want to
Right.
break that with a funny fumble or a mean fumble.
Right. And in that case, I think a system like, so I've been playing Triangle Agency, and let me tell you, Triangle Agency is phenomenal. And it has a system where, depending on the actions of the players, you generate chaos for the GM to spend on various things.
Mm-hmm.
And I think not necessarily in the sense of a fumble, but like that chaos type idea where you're generating a resource for your GM to spend later is kind of an interesting idea to use towards a more nuanced version of a fumble, right?
Mm-hmm.
You miss a clue, or you didn't investigate hard enough and didn't pick up on X, Y, and Z. So, find X, and I'll deal with that later and how I want to do or what I want to use that for. But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
Where it is essentially you fumbled the situation, but we're doing it in a subtle way where we're not necessarily being like, ha, look, you completely missed this. We're more so going, I'm going to take that and stick it in my back pocket and just hold on to it for later.
Well, see, and I think, how do I want to say? I think, and this is, my thoughts here, but I think, like, the narrative dice system, Star Wars, Genesis, whatever, that doesn't have fumble rules per se, but it has despair.
It does.
And I think that is a beautiful way to handle, we'll call it a fumble, or what you might typically consider a fumble in a game that you want to stay more
serious.
We'll call it serious.
Yeah.
Tonal. Yeah. Like you were just kind of saying, right? Like, it doesn't have to be, oh, you dropped your weapon. Maybe it's you miss and seemingly unconnected, things get worse somehow.
Right.
Like, it doesn't.
Absolutely.
I wonder sometimes, and maybe we can branch into this too, because so someone gave me a copy of an OSR zine called Knock, and I started reading a couple of the articles in it, and they were talking about the theory behind OSR play, and it struck me that, like, in some ways, so the premise of the one article I read was that essentially the OSR mentality is about not having a rule for everything, and so making a ruling based on a dice roll.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of hit me in that particular article. They were kind of contrasting it to, like, we'll say, Powered by the Apocalypse mechanics, where it's like a fail forward, etc. And in contrasting that with the OSR of the dice fall where they fall and we figure it out from there. But, like, I wonder at what point, if you want to play a narrative heavy game, do the rules take a backseat until you need them to adjudicate something, and you don't go, that can't happen, just during the course of normal play, you don't go, well, this can't happen because the rules say it can't.
Right.
Like, do you just pull out the rules when you need them and otherwise let the story go as it goes? And I think that's where fumble mechanics, like, you were talking before we started recording about, Cyberpunk Red and how it doesn't have actual fumble mechanics. Whereas if I
Right.
recall correctly, the fumble mechanics in the original in Cyberpunk 2020 were actually rather brutal.
They were very brutal. And
And go ahead.
yeah, no, that can just be absolutely punishing and disheartening to a player.
Mm-hmm.
Because we hit a point where somebody had rolled a failure, and the conversation at the table went, "Oh, you're really lucky that we don't have fumble mechanics." And the player that had never played 2020 before was like, "Phoenix," and so we brought it up, and it was like, "Oh, this is just brutal, like vicious."
Yeah. And so, like, I wonder sometimes, like, and I will say one of my criticisms of, to steal a phrase from Ken and Robin, F20, meaning, the classic D20 based fantasy games, is that a one is a fumble. Well, the
Mhm.
problem with that, to me, is that a one on a D20 is a fixed 5% chance, period.
Right.
Just it always will be, regardless of whatever bonus structure your character has advanced to. It's a flat 5% chance. Of games that have fumble mechanics, I'm very partial to the way like Delta Green does it, where it's doubles are criticals. Whichever side of the success failure line on they fall on determines whether it's a critical success or a critical failure slash what's commonly termed as a fumble.
Mhm.
And I like that because it scales with the character's skill. But it hadn't crossed my mind directly until hearing, Ken Hite and Robin Laws talking about it. That, man, what if you just use those what you would typically use as a fumble? Again, my mind went to the way you use a despair in the narrative dice system. Because they were, thinking of it as a, or the I forget what the terms they were using, but like I feel like, look, if you want to play a very comedic game and want to have your fumbles be the way a lot of us have played them, that's all well and good. But if you're telling a more narrative, you're focusing more on the narrative and story, and you don't want to break the mood, man, use that bad failure more in the context of how you would use a despair, be it, it could be your gun jams, which I think is actually, but anyway, you get what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
it can be a way to ratchet up the tension by something bad happening, but it doesn't necessarily have to mean, because the other thing, if you think about it, right, in most games, your characters are very competent individuals.
Yes.
In some cases, way past even an extremely competent normal person in that world. Exalted, for example, right? Like the capabilities of exalted characters are astronomical compared to what a normal mortal can do. And so, like in a sense, to me, you fail your athletics check, so you trip and fall on your face, just feels dumb in that context.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it feels bad to be like, "Oh, you failed your athletics check, so you tripped and fell and now you look dumb." Like
Right.
in a level-based system like Dungeons and Dragons, that maybe works when you are first, second, third level, you haven't been doing this very much. After a certain point, that gets old.
Well, right, and I think that's the thing, right? Like it's one thing if that happens when you're still trying to figure out which end of the sword you're supposed to hang on to, in a sense. But to take that in another way, right? If you think about the starting gear for a D&D character, that is so far out of the reach of your average, be it farmer, you know, employed city person. Like, it kind of feels weird if you put it in that frame, though. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, I'm sort of just trying to make a counterpoint, not necessarily argue with you, if that makes sense.
No, no, no. I just look at something like Cyberpunk. Okay, so I've been playing a lot of Cyberpunk Red. Those characters straight out of the off the character sheet, they are competent and ready to do what they need to do. There's a
Mm-hmm.
reason why that system doesn't have a like super aggressive level up system or progression.
Mm-hmm.
It, are kitted to do what they need to do. It's just a matter of getting them the right actual items and telling the story. And that's a lot of fun to play characters that you don't have to feel like are needing babysat. And yeah, sometimes everybody drops something, fumbles something every once in a while, but I don't know, just to me I feel like playing more so with like a chaos or a we talked about the narrative dice thing of like, oh, well, this plays more into like, oh, I'll stick this in my back pocket for later.
Well, how many times playing that system does GM go, oh, I'm gonna put that threat in my pocket for now?
What was that?
I said, how many times, like, when we've played that system, has the GM gone, hey, I'm going to put those 2 threat in my pocket for the time being?
Right, exactly. Again, I call that more of like a karma system. but
Well, call it whatever you want, right? Like you were talking about the chaos system in Triangle Agency.
yeah,
I think Age now has, they originally introduced it in the first edition of The Expanse, but they have a thing called churn, and I think that actually works kind of inverse of that, in that uh, a lot of like very good successes actually builds a churn pool for the GM. But like if you take that to the context of like The Expanse, as more good things as more good things happen, the characters are going, okay, this is all fine and dandy, but what bad thing is going to happen because our lives suck and this can't be real?
right, exactly. Well, again, that's where that comes into where you almost call that a karma system, where
Right.
good things happen and then bad things have to happen. You know what I mean? You just feel that like, oh, the bad is coming. I can
Mm-hmm.
and I think it's definitely a tool to keep in your back pocket. And again, with karma, you have, or with the fumbles, you really just have to think about it and do things that you know are right for your table and aren't gonna make your players feel invalidated, because that's something that can really happen with a fumble table. Is you do something, you fumble, your players feel completely pointless. Like,
Right. And look, we all like to have laughs, but most of us don't like to be laughed at.
right, yeah,
And so I mean, I don't know, and I guess too this ties into, right, like, well, I go back to that bit of advice from GM Chris: don't roll unless failure is interesting. I mean, that
yeah,
says a lot, and I think the this conversation around fumbles or critical failure or whatever you want to call it kind of ties into that, right? Like, and maybe that's why too. I think a lot of your newer game designs don't actually have fumble tables in them.
oh yeah,
Like
yeah.
you
I'm certain
mentioned,
that's why.
Red doesn't. As I recall, 5e technically doesn't have fumble tables, or not
No, they
tables,
do
but just
not.
as
In
written,
it,
there are no fumble mechanics.
yeah, not in general. I think a lot of games are going away with it. Um, at the same time, you know, I yeah, I haven't encountered many games, but I have been seeing more games that are using that, like we just talked about, the chaos and the resource type system, where you're
Hmm.
building, flip a light side point that becomes a dark point for your GM to spend, or
Right.
despair, or any of that type of thing. Um, miss that type of I
Yeah.
miss that out of NDS sometimes. Is the here, I'll just flip a coin and because I need this right now.
Well, see, that mechanic in and of itself is a thing that, boy, because okay, look, as the old school, well, I'm the GM, I'm God, I can do whatever. That still, in a way, kind of applies, but that mechanic establishes an economy of that. So
Yeah,
the GM can't per se just hammer on the players, because in doing some of the players get things to spend to make things happen to their advantage.
right. It balances the scales one way or the other. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. Um, Triangle Agency has a thing where you can ask the agency, and that seems really interesting because you can ask for situation to be changed, but you have to have like an in mundane reasons why that situation was changed.
Mm-hmm.
So, say for example, we needed a traffic jam. We're chasing a guy down the highway, and I need a traffic jam about 10 miles up. I can ask the agency for jam because, you know, a guy that's working in a construction crew up ahead is falling asleep because he's got this flock of like migratory birds that are like, you have to give an elaborate reason why, items, why this is happening. But the ability to be like, okay, well, I want this, and here's why it's happening, and I can come up with a good enough reason for it to happen that they'll just do it for you, which is kind of funny.
You know what? And now does that generate into that chaos pool for the GM then?
I don't remember. Pause though. There's a number of things that can create chaos, and I don't know if that's one of them. I can't remember. I have kept myself mostly ambiguous to the rules of Triangle Agency, and I'll tell you why. In Triangle Agency, there is you are penalized for, which we've talked a little bit about this. You are penalized for meta knowledge of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have read that as humanly possible as to not get the demerits for having the meta knowledge of the game.
But you know what? I like to play that way sometimes.
Oh
like,
man, it's
just
so fun to be like, teach me this.
like, I want to do this. Well, it's going to cost you blah blah. Okay.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like, but in a sense, it's that, I don't know if you want to call it naivete, right? Like,
Yeah, I think that's what it
you're
is. There's
thinking in
something
the
fun about that.
story, not in
Yeah.
game mechanics, and I feel like
Oh yeah,
that's such a more, for me anyway, that's such a more
it's such
immersive,
freeing.
right?
Yeah, and it's also very freeing because you don't have to feel like you're, oh man, I'm all hung up on these rules and I don't know what I'm doing with this. And like, no, you don't need to worry about a lot of that. You can just be like, okay, well, can I do this? I can do this. Okay, cool. Well, let me do this then.
Right. And I think, well, and you weren't here, the PGX episode from a few weeks back where I was talking to Wiz, and he was telling me about running a session of what was essentially Morkborg for one of his kids, but he didn't even give him a character sheet. And he said when they got done, his kid looked at him and went, "That was so much fun."
Oh yeah.
Because of exactly what you were just saying, of it became just an imagination thing. And because the mechanics of the Borg system are so simple, where it's, 12 or better or whatever, it was just, okay, I'll roll a die. Okay. You know what I mean? Like, it became very much a game of imagination, which I think, I don't know, that's kind of what I come to the table for. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Sometimes, as much as I enjoy trying to manipulate the rules of things, I also find if I'm doing it that way, I get bored quicker. And sort of semi-related tangent here. As I mentioned at the beginning of the show, I'm not the biggest video gamer. But I used to really get into like some, I would get a new Madden game every couple years for a while or whatever. But I always ended up, I would find those plays that kind of screwed with the AI algorithms. Like there was the one year that I played it, there was this pass that you could throw to the halfback going out into the flat on the one side that very, very high percent, not for big gain, but it was very high percentage, pass completion, whatever, or certain pass routes that unless the defense was in a very specific, counter play, we'll call it, it worked almost every time. And I would find myself just going back to those plays constantly. And like it, in some sense, it feels like you're cheating the game.
Yeah.
And then you get bored, or I get bored because, well, I know I need 3 yards. Yeah, I got 75, 80% chance of doing it if I call this play. And like, man, that's not as fun as let's do this and hope it works and be excited when it does. I don't know if
Right?
that paralleled as much as I thought it did, but
No, I completely agree with you. I was hearing what you were saying that makes, yeah, you felt like you were cheating the game itself.
like exploits are fun to find, but if you continue to go back to it, it's not fun anymore. At least not after so many times.
Yeah, I agree with you. I for me, I don't know. Again, I want to know as little if I'm playing in a game, as little about the game that I'm playing in as possible. And if I'm running a game, I want to know as much about the game as possible. And that's just it's just the two dichotomies of where I'm at in my gaming career at this point. If I'm gonna play something, and yeah, I'll sit, I'll read the core resolution mechanic, I'll make my character, I'll do all the things, but at the end of the day, I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know. I don't want to know the dirty secret that you have that, secretly I can roll this die and decide 4 different things. I don't want to know from running the game. Yeah, I do need to know that.
Yeah.
And that's just where I'm at. And I'm just at this point where I'm like, okay, if I'm going to sit down and play, I want to have fun. And I don't want to get too analytical about, I don't want to get too into the weeds. I don't want to get too analytical about the rules and how my character interacts with the rules and do and blah, blah, blah. No, I want to make a fun character. And when I say a fun character, I mean a character that I enjoy playing and that has a voice that I enjoy voicing, and I want to role play the game.
Yeah. No, I think this is in a sense the same argument that I make about how I like my GMs to use a screen.
Yeah.
Because that way I can't do the reverse math in my head.
Right, exactly. I started using a screen for Cyberpunk, and it's hilarious because I roll all kinds of stuff behind my screen.
Mm-hmm. And
just
like
because yeah,
it's there. But like
it is.
It's to me, in all honesty, like I said, as a GM, I don't care particularly if the players see my rolls or not. And in some systems, like the NDS system, everyone wants to see the rolls, and it's cool. It's part of the fun of that engine.
Yeah, exactly. You cheer and boo, and like NDS has some of the most interesting rolls because you actually like feel invested in the result of the rolls.
Right.
In a lot of ways.
Yeah. NDS is very good at not having nothing happens rolls.
Right.
But I mean, like for me, I guess to a certain point, maybe some of it is that I do play games for some of the mystery or the whimsy of not knowing what's going to happen, and to your point about intentionally kind of not learning the nuts and bolts of the system. It's like it frees you from that thinking of, is this the best action? It's just the action that I want to take because it seems appropriate.
Yeah, and to each their own, and everybody's their own thing, their own way. But for me, I don't ask myself a lot of the times if this is the right action. I don't want to. I don't want to have to think that way. I want to think in more, like you just said, in more of terms of like, is this the action that my character would do? Is this within character reason? Yes? Okay, then I'm doing it. Is it going to have the result that I want? Well, it's a result that my character would want. It may not be a result that the exact table might expect or need, but that's not... And I'm not saying it to be antagonist, but I'm saying more so along the lines of that's not necessarily my worry.
Well, okay. But I think this goes to the point that we've made a number of times in our conversations about, at least for us, and I think a lot of the role-playing community, you aren't playing role-playing games to quote unquote win. You're playing to have an interesting, entertaining story.
Experience. Yeah.
Right.
Definitely.
And so if you go to, where we started talking about fumbles and stuff, sure, they can be entertaining in the moment, and if that's the way you want the tone of the evening session to go, hey, do your thing, right? But you can also take those same roles and use them to ratchet up the tension of the situation. And I think as long as you're clear with your players when you decide you're going to do this, right? Like, look, not every time you roll a natural one is it going to be a fumble in the classic sense, but there are going to be things that happen in the game world that are caused by this meta occurrence of what the dice landed on.
Well, and
go ahead.
How many stories do you have of this one time I fumbled? Because I don't have many stories like that.
No, I mean, like occasionally, yeah, they're funny in the moment.
Occasionally,
but
they don't hold up to the, I did this really cool or really dumb thing. Because cool doesn't necessarily have to be that you were the cool guy.
Right, it was a cool event,
Right. Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that, I mean, okay, TPK is rarely a cool event, but it could be a story that, like, because of the cascading bad things that happened, is a really memorable, pleasant, if strangely enjoyable story. I don't know. You get...
Yeah, I think that's cool.
Like the science. Well, sometimes the experiment just taught you what doesn't work.
Yeah, exactly. Well, do you have any final thoughts on this before we move into Game of the Week?
I don't think so. I think just, the thought was really to just look at what you might be able to do with fumbles other than the classic thing and make your game more interesting with it.
Absolutely.
So with that, Game of the Week!
Game of the Week! Game of the Week!
Game of the Week. I have a game. It is
You
called...
have a game?
I do. It is called Oxygen Hog.
I think I scrolled past this.
I'm surprised. Well, I understand based on the cover art, and this is not a diss. Not a diss at the cover art, but based on the cover art, I can understand how you could scroll past it. This is a game that's up your alley, however, because it is a desert-bound vehicular role-playing combat game.
Ooh.
It is Mad Max. The sort of second line, when the road gets mean, crash into combat with a unique vehicle focused system that allows players to bully and ram enemy and allied vehicles into different positions. And it's, you have 4 classes, and it is very much a vehicular combat desert wasteland type game.
Wonder if you could use this to do Twisted Metal.
From what I'm reading and how I'm reading the combat is, not necessarily. Mm-hmm. Because it doesn't appear that there's any, like, guns in a sense. Because Twisted Metal does have, like, fired projectiles.
True.
And this seems more of a, more like the original Mad Max, where it's bumping, grinding, shoving, we're going to put blades on our wheels and make it so that it's going to slash your tires, and we're going to put oil slicks in the back, stuff like that. This seems like a lot of fun, and it's $10.
Hey, that's not bad. 127 pages.
Yeah.
And came out this week.
Yeah. So that is called Oxygen Hog. And let me say, that is a cool name. That is a really cool name.
It really is. Like I when I say I scrolled past it, I remembered seeing it, but I didn't look at it. So
yeah, no, like I said, I almost didn't look at it either, and then I was like, that's a really cool name. What could that be? Because the cover art's not clear on what that is until you actually get it like brought up bigger, and you can see it's cars.
Yeah, now that
it's like cars driving across a wasteland with a big dust cloud.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's cool.
All right, so Oxygen Hog. So I am going to not act well, sort of a game, but sort of not. This is actually a campaign module for a system called Ghost Ape System. Now, the adventure module that I'm going to be my game of the week is called Steel Ghost. The cool thing about this is that the core rule system is pay what you want.
Oh, very cool.
This campaign module is $12.99 for the PDFs, 178 pages, also came out within the last week or so. The premise of this is actually kind of neat. It's a post-conflict survival crawl across the Let me try that again. It's a post-conflict survival crawl across the shattered edge of Eastern Europe. You play as the crew of Bandit 1, the last functioning NATO stealth tank. Yes, it does have very much kind of Twilight 2000-y vibes in a way, but I kind of like the solo tank concept of it.
I like that. I think that's cool. I like the idea of having a tank with a crew and you are the last in the apocalypse. Like, this is a cool idea. Very cool idea.
Yeah, like the kind of tag in it is the war was over the moment the missiles flew. It just took the dying a little more time. The last message from headquarters before it all went to hell: good luck, you're on your own.
Mm-hmm.
And like, boy, there's so many ways it feels like you could even probably take this campaign frame and adapt it to any number of, existing IPs or other games. Like, it feels like the story itself is probably good fodder. But like I said, the cool thing is, and I'll probably put a link for it in the show notes, but here, I'll link it to you.
For the pay what you want system?
Yeah.
I already had that up.
Okay. But yeah, it claims to be kind of an exploding dice, pretty lethal system, but that fits for kind of a post-apocalyptic,
Oh, I want my post-apocalypse kind of lethal.
It makes sense.
I'm sure. I mean, there's lots of games that are post-apocalypse that aren't that lethal, but when I want to play something that's like this realistic and this gritty, yeah, I want it to be pretty lethal.
Yeah. So yeah, it runs on a game called Ghost Ape Systems, which the publisher is Ghost Ape Games. But like, I think it's also a cool idea that they put the core system as pay what you want, and their highest suggested price is $2 for 400 and some pages of rules.
Right.
But I kind of like the idea of like, look, here's the system. I'm really going to try and sell you the adventure modules.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, like I said, it's the name of the adventure module. Name of the adventure module is Steel Ghost for the Ghost Ape system. But like I said, it looks like a fun concept to do something with.
That it does. Well, with all that being said, as always, links to everything are in the show notes. Facebook, not really. Discord, absolutely. YouTube, if you want to watch/listen to us. Static image, but it's our podcast. Patreon, as always.
Mm-hmm.
And want to remind everyone to be kind to one another and get out there and play some RPGs.
Yep. Take care, y'all.
Intro and outro music by the band 12 Noon. You can email us at meandsteverpg@gmail.com. You can find us on Twitter at @andrpgs. Find us on Facebook at Me and Steve RPG Podcast. On Discord at Me and Steve RPGs. And as always, all of these links are in the show notes. Thank you, and be kind to one another.
How much for the cigar?
Cigar, $20, dog. You gotta go down the street to the store and buy that.